Forget DNA evidence. Forget Miranda rights. Forget your high-powered lawyer arguing about circumstantial evidence. Imagine you live in medieval Europe and you've been accused of, say, stealing a pig. When you get to the courthouse, there's no jury, no judge, and definitely no witness stand. There is, however, a massive, roaring fire, and hanging over it is a piece of glowing, white-hot iron. Your defense lawyer? A raging bonfire and the direct intervention of God. Welcome to the trial by ordeal, the bizarre, horrific, and often deadly legal system that dominated Europe for centuries, where your fate literally hung on whether or not your Creator decided to perform a minor miracle on your blistering hand. The logic of divine justice. For the early medieval mind, this wasn't barbaric. It was perfectly logical. The state believed they could only discover the facts. But when two people gave conflicting testimonies, how could a mere mortal king or baron truly know the truth? The solution was to call in the ultimate authority, God. The premise was simple. You can lie to the king, but you cannot lie to the Almighty. If you were innocent, God would miraculously intervene to protect you from harm, or at least help your wound heal supernaturally fast. If you were guilty, well, you were about to be physically punished before your execution. The Hot Iron Gauntlet. The most popular and perhaps most terrifying form was the ordeal of hot iron. The process was deeply ritualized. It started with a religious mass. Then the accused would fast for days. Finally, the church bells would ring, and the ordeal would begin. A piece of iron, sometimes weighing a single pound, sometimes 3 pounds, was placed in a fire. Once it was glowing red-hot, the priest would bless it. The accused would then have to carry this scorching weight for 9 prescribed paces. Afterward, the priests would immediately bandage the burned hand, seal it with the church's seal, and send the accused away. Now comes the twist. The actual trial only started 3 days later. The fate of the accused was decided entirely by how the wound looked when the bandage was removed. If the wound was clean, healing well, and clearly on its way to recovery, congratulations! God proclaimed your innocence, and you were free to go. If the wound was infected, festering, and looked absolutely disgusting, you were declared guilty, and the physical torment was only just beginning. Drowning or guilt. Pick one if hot metal wasn't your style. You might have preferred the ordeal of cold water, though that was often even more of a lose-lose scenario. This ordeal was mainly used for lesser crimes or accusations of sorcery. The accused would be stripped, tied up with a rope, just in case they survived the ordeal to pull them out, and then thrown into consecrated holy water. The logic here was reversed. Holy water, being pure, would reject a sinful, guilty body. Therefore, if you floated, even slightly, you were guilty. If you sank like a stone, the holy water had accepted you, meaning you were pure, and you were immediately pulled out, innocent and probably coughing up half the river. What a relief! Other ordeals included the ordeal of the cross, where the accuser and the accused stood with their arms outstretched like a crucifix, and the one who dropped their arms first was deemed guilty. If you were a lawyer, you probably just hoped your client was the local marathon runner. Why did it end? So how did Europe move past lighting people on fire to determine if they stole a chicken? It took Pope Innocent III. In 1215, he declared that priests were no longer allowed to participate in these rituals, stating that they were abusing the sacraments. Without the divine legitimacy of the Church blessing the iron and the water, the trials lost their moral weight and quickly collapsed. The legal system pivoted to a new concept: local juries, based on neighborly knowledge and reasoned testimony. But perhaps the greatest irony of the trial by ordeal is that it may have actually worked, not as a miracle, but as a deterrent. The certainty of horrific, divine punishment meant that many genuinely guilty people simply confessed rather than face the heat, which, when you think about it, is perhaps the one truly logical aspect of this entirely bizarre chapter in legal history.